Imagine you're a man with all the information that nobody else knows. A man that says that there's objects that have potentially came from an entire different system. Bob Lazar did, and that's what we're going to be covering today. The man Bob Lazar was behind all of the cases that said everything from he was working on propulsion systems to anti-gravity, things that kind of make you go, well, wait a second. Luckily, Nick and I, we're going to be covering that case tonight. And the cool thing about it is I've done tons of research to kind of break down all aspects of the story. We're not leaving anything out. Truth or speculation, you're going to want to watch this podcast. But let's stop talking about it. Let's dive a little deeper. Here at Deceptive Reality, let's go.
Grasping the thin, almost translucent veil between that of fact and fiction. Revealing mysteries of the past, folklore passed down from father to son, unsolved murders, and things that go bump in the night. You've entered Deceptive Reality.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Deceptive Reality. My name's Nick, and this, my friends, is the loquacious Bert.
Loquacious.
Yep.
Is that what you said?
Loquacious.
Man, I feel really dumb when we have these now because I'm like, I have no clue what it makes me sound like an Aquaman.
No, actually, this is nothing related to Aquaman. It's someone who is good at talking and speaks eloquently.
Why are you lying to the people for, Nick?
They've heard you with that radio voice there. They know.
Listen, I can tell you firsthand. I was doing a recording this weekend, and when I was doing it, when I played it back, I go, that isn't even a word. Like that right there, not a word. I created some, and then I created an entire phrase that I know has never been a phrase with words. It's never been words.
Oh, wow. That's that. Man, I don't know if that's good or not. Were you having a little spell there or something?
Well, listen, hey, it's going to be fun. I want to see if people figured out, I was actually going to ask ChatGPT at one point in time to create a word and a description that I could use for everyday life. Just have it randomly pick a word. And then just apply it into my conversation just to see if people pick up on it and if other people start using that word.
So this is a brand new word you want to add. You want to add, like, create a word.
Yeah, 100%. Like it's never existed.
You should do it. I accused you of that one episode, actually.
You did. And listen, intrepidatious, baby.
Intrepidatious.
Bam.
See, this is how I learn things. I go on a podcast and hear a word I don't know and find out later it's a brand new word.
Listen, it's good for everyone, Nick, if you think about it. Like me, I'm creating words. I created words that existed before.
Right.
It's a win-win.
I think I wasn't the only one who accused you of that, though.
Everyone accused me. They said that's not a word. And I'm sitting there going, man, I could have sworn that's a word. And when I looked it up, I'm like, vindication.
Yeah, you're the Scrabble champion. You would have beat us there.
Actually, it's funny. So I speak at maybe a third grade level, but when I play Scrabble or there's Words with Friends, when I used to play Words with Friends, I almost won every single game that we've ever played. I've almost won that.
Do you know why?
Jess and I used to play it, and she used to get annoyed.
Do you know why you always win?
No, I assume that I know a lot of words, but I just don't.
You're loquacious. That's why.
That's what it is, boys and girls. I'm a much better writer than I am a speaker. Like we've got a blog right now, Nick. I don't know if you know. I cheat a lot on that, though. I cheat a lot on that. Listen, I look up stuff and I go, yeah, we should probably use that. I tell you what, the blogs I've been coming up with here lately, bangers. People's been liking them.
Oh, yeah.
So if you've not checked out our blog, check out our blog if you're interested. Anything that we cover for the next following series of days, bam, blog articles on it. Like we did the infield poltergeist for you guys. Now this is going to be like 2 weeks ago, right? 3 weeks ago, but Prime example for that one, I talked about Bill's voice and the medical research behind it. Who does that?
That creeped me out. When I first heard that, and it was live, I was creeped out. And that's not easy.
Everyone that I talked to, that's the first thing they mention is, dude, we thought episode 1 was pretty good. And then we went to episode 2 and then we listened. First off, you said there was audio files, but we didn't understand there was like actual legit audio files in the narration. They said, the moment those hits freaked me out.
Yeah, that scared me, man. I wasn't expecting that. I'm glad it happened. But I wasn't expecting it.
It made for a fun podcast. Speaking of which, Nick, this is my topic again. Last week, we covered your topic, which was a banger. I like that topic.
I liked it, but there's something about that ticked me right off, and you're all going to have to go back and listen to find out what it is.
And the best part is, and this was off our podcast. I don't know if we should bring this up, Nick. I mean, I guess at this point in time, they've already seen the podcast. If you've not watched that podcast, go back and see it. It's the Jersey Devil podcast.
Oh, yeah. They'll have seen it by the time this comes out.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. But we figured something out after the podcast. When the record button was off, there's something we figured out, Nick. We pieced that bad boy together.
I was shocked. To find that out.
So after the podcast, for anyone that doesn't know, we was trying to figure out the New Jersey Devil and why all these spots happen. And Nick and I was talking about it, and we was like, I wonder if this is near a national park. And guess what we determined?
It was darn in one.
It's in a national park. We're doggone investigators over here. Listen, this is why you come to our channel.
Solved it.
That's right.
I've not heard other people say this.
I mean,
I've not heard anyone say this.
I don't know, because I've never, I've turned off every episode apparently that's ever said, tonight we're covering the New Jersey Devil. I'm like, nope, blank. So
I bet you won't do it in the future.
No, not now. Now I understand what it was. At first I just heard it and I'm like, man, this is so dumb. I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm actually coming up with some hypotheses on some other things, Nick. Our case today, when I did a little deep dive on it, I have a hypothesis on that. Also have a hypothesis on something on my channel.
Mm-hmm.
The more cases I do, because it's in the same set of things, I'm noticing a trend. So we're just figuring it all out over here, Nick. You don't know what this one is. I've deliberately kept this from him.
Well, you do that every time. It's part of our shtick. We don't know.
Sure.
We're always confused, and that's how we like it.
I wouldn't have it any other way.
That's right. I brought my new journal to
write with. Need it, Nick. And also, not that you guys will understand my pain. Last week, I had a notebook, and let's just say I threw the pen away because I got a clicking problem. I got a real bad clicking problem. I like to click the pen thing. So now I've got a notebook. Look, this is a one subject, and I got a pencil that's got a clicky thing, but I can't click it too many times because the lead will keep going out. So,
that's right. I'm old school. I got the old fashioned pencil.
So. Number 2, baby. You could take tests, Nick.
I could. It is number 2 as well. Yeah.
Oh, I know.
Sure is. I'm test ready, and this is a test for us.
This is a test, Nick. Are you ready to see what the topic is?
I am ready to draw a picture and listen.
For anyone that doesn't know, on the YouTube machine, if you're not on YouTube, any of the pictures or things that we're going to talk about, I'm going to put on Instagram, Facebook, probably Reddit. But I can't wait to see Nick's face when we get to the topic. Let's stop talking about it. Let's be about it. Let's go.
Today, we peer into the recesses of a story so intriguing, yet shrouded in mystery. It has left both skeptics and believers questioning the very fabric of our understanding. A story of one man who dared to come forward with information so volatile it put everything he held dear at risk. Bob claims to have carried out tasks most of us can only dream of or have nightmares about. Tasks involving technologies so advanced they could only be described as otherworldly. Today we need to answer, is Bob a whistleblower from within the mysterious confines of Area 51, or is he a mere fraud, weaving an elaborate tapestry of fabrications? Brace yourselves as we journey into the tangled saga of a man who insists he's held the future of humanity in his very hands. Welcome to Deceptive Reality.
All right. So I know a couple things about this.
Okay.
One, this is your favorite topic.
This is like my favorite topic.
And I don't know if you got to blur it out later, but I held up my notepad because I knew what it was as soon as it started talking. I don't know if you've got to censor that. And the third thing, this is going to be a 14-part episode, so buckle up. Because this is Bert's man. This is the dude. Listen, he loves this guy.
I have researched Bob Lazar my entire life because this happened in 1982, is I believe the year that this all started, from the beginning of Bob Lazar. Now, the narration's not going to go into a lot of this. There's a lot of questions that I know is going to come out of this episode. Nick, you and I have talked about Bob Lazar. The reason that I wanted to bring this one up is because I keep referencing, this Bob Lazar and the Bob Lazar case and the Bob this and the Bob that. And I'm like, people probably don't really know who Bob Lazar is. Like, of Bob Lazar.
Right.
But unless you know the whole story of Bob Lazar, you'll never appreciate when I'm talking about it. So I said, episode, baby.
Yeah, I need this for research material because I do not know about Bob Lazar deeply. I only hear him, like you said, coming up in every conversation or story you read about this. Mm-hmm. So this is study material for me.
So what I did on this is I kept as close to the narrative that is, as I always do, the truthful line is what I like to call it. We're going to deviate left and right on that line, but when we listen to the narration, that's considered the gospel.
Right. Just the facts.
But we're going to kind of weave in and out of that line because I got to tell the stories of this is what they say happened. This is what Bob says happened. Because listen, we're not pro, in this case, Bob Lazar.
Right.
But we're not skeptic Bob Lazar either. It's our job to ride the middle. And then at the end go, I think this is what's happening.
Right. So this is going to help me decide if I'm skeptical about Bob Lazar or if I believe in Bob Lazar. So that's my goal to get out of this.
1,000%. Listen, there's a lot of stuff I had to cut out of the narration to give everyone an idea. When we typically do narrations, it's usually between 10 minutes and 25 minutes.
Right.
When I started this story, my narration was 48 minutes.
Oh boy, this might be 14 parts.
I cut it from 48 minutes down to 31 minutes.
All right.
So the stuff that I cut out, we're going to talk about. I'm trying to remember. I got some notes on my phone, so you guys are going to see me in my phone. I gave Nick a lot of stuff in a folder, some pictures and stuff. This one's going to be a banger. If you don't know about Bob Lazar, if you want to know anything about UFOs, this is your episode, because this is, for me, I think when it comes to a UFO story, regardless of what it is, Roswell, the one, obviously, Hopkinsville that we talked about in Kentucky, the Kentucky one. When we talk about Shag Harbor, I think the Bob Lazar story explains all of it.
Oh, really? I'm super
I think it
interested
explains
in that then.
Everything.
So, if you recall as well, I'm scared of UFOs and aliens.
You are.
This is going to be this is going to be Halloween part 1 for me.
Let me tell you, there's a lot of info in a very short time frame. We're going to try to navigate it the best that we can. Y'all just bear with us. If you ask me a question, Nick, and I know it's further in, if it's further in, I'm going to be like, we're going to talk about it, because you're going to run into a lot of questions.
Yeah, I'm already prepared for that. I always have a lot of questions. I'm like a kid.
So now you know the subject. Are you ready to hear the opening? What I call the opening sentence.
All right. Let's hear the humble beginnings.
The humble beginning. That's the best way to put it, Nick. Are you ready?
Yeah, let's do that. I'm ready.
We now venture into a tale that has fascinated the public and confounded experts for decades. We pull back the veil of secrecy on a man who claimed to have touched the very fabric of inhuman technology. Bob grew up in a world full of wonder, always attracted to the mysteries of science and technology. A brilliant student, he was captivated by the infinite possibilities that the world of science opened for him. But even as a young man, he had no idea that his limitless curiosity would one day lead him down a path so extraordinary it defies belief. In his early years, Bob seemed to be on track for a conventional career in science and technology. His academic credentials were solid, and his interest in subjects like physics and engineering only intensified with time. While details according to public record were mostly impossible to prove, almost to the point to where even that is mysterious. According to Bob, he studied at two of the nation's most prestigious institutions, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology and the California Institute of Technology. But like much of his life, even this aspect is not without its mysteries. Lazar claims to have earned degrees in both physics and electronic technology. He recounts walking the hallowed halls of MIT and Caltech, absorbing knowledge. Yet, when we turn the pages of the academic registries at these esteemed schools, Bob Lazar's name is clearly absent. No records, no transcripts, and not even a hint of his alleged attendance. Could these institutes be part of a cover-up? Or is Bob's academic history a fabrication designed to lend credence to his extraordinary claims?
Well, boy. I gotta tell you, you were leading me down a skeptical path until the last bit of it there. Because when they caught him in a lie, that is when I'm like, oh, you got me. I'm hooked again.
That's half the fun of all these stories, I think, is
right.
There's a truth somewhere, there's a lie somewhere, and where we generally sit at is somewhere in the middle.
Right.
Normally. Now, I've got my notes over here because there's a lot. I'm going to cover a few things that was covered and a few things that wasn't covered. Obviously, one big thing that I think we definitely need to cover is Bob Lazar said he was at MIT.
Right.
And Caltech.
Okay. Yes. Yep. I've got that.
Yep. So those two prestigious colleges, he said he was there. Now, for skepticism reasons, I'm going to put the negatives out there.
Okay.
When Lazar was pressed, he was unable to supply the names of any of the lecturers or fellow students that he was with. William Duxler was in fact located at Pierce Junior College and had never taught at Caltech, which is one of the people that he said was there.
Right.
Now, Friedman asserted quite obviously, if one can go to MIT, one doesn't go to Pierce. Lazar was at Pierce at the very same time he supposedly went to MIT, which was more than 2,500 miles away.
Yeah, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
No.
Because they wouldn't have correspondence courses at that time, would they?
I would not think so. We're talking 80s here.
Right.
So,
but what was Sally Struthers selling at that time? Correspondence courses.
That is true.
I just want to put that out there. I'm a skeptic.
That is true.
But I want to put that out there because that's a fact.
That is true.
Yeah.
There's something that I find very interesting about this, though. And here's what I'm thinking. When they pressed this guy, and we're not going into this, that we are, but we're not.
Right.
When they pressed him, he was in his early 20s.
Right.
If all of you that's sitting there going, okay, he probably lied on this, tell me y'all haven't lied in a job interview a little bit.
Right. Right.
They're going to ask you a question.
Sorry to interrupt, but at that point, when he was pressed for that, was he still going under the alternate identity? Or was he out of that at that time?
So he's always said this since day one.
Right.
So under both the alias and I think even now, like even if you see interviews now, like there was a Joe Rogan interview probably 4 or 5 years back. He still
Right.
makes the same claims. Now, he
Okay.
doesn't dive as deep into them, if that
Yeah.
makes sense. So
Okay.
I'm not saying that he didn't go there. I'm not saying that he went there. But what I'm saying
Right.
is I wouldn't be hard pressed to believe that if pressed as a young gentleman,
Right.
that he didn't lie and say higher credentials than what he truly was to try to advance in life. I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying it's a possibility.
Right. I can see that, and I'm gonna have to go with that because I'm not a young man in my 20s, and I can clearly remember the name of a lot of my teachers from university.
Correct.
So I'm gonna stick to your view of that for now, but that does bring out some skepticism. Now the lab part,
100%.
that's a different thing entirely, and the hospital not having record of him.
Los Alamos. Yeah. So
Right.
he said he was with Los Alamos, which is, for anyone that doesn't know, it's a national laboratory. Basically, there they have what I believe is an accelerator, a particle accelerator.
Okay.
Kind of like, I think the big one's in Amsterdam now. Am I correct on that?
Are you talking about the Large Hadron Collider?
Yeah.
That actually spans a number of countries. It's that big.
Yeah, but didn't it start in Amsterdam or something like that? Didn't they build the first section of that?
I'm not
Don't
sure.
quote me on that.
Yeah.
But it's basically similar to that. And what they were basically doing was taking a particle, they were sending on a much smaller scale. And they just wanted to see what those kind of things opened up. Now, the reason that I bring that up and the importance of Los Alamos is eventually when we get a little deeper in this conversation, we're going to ask some questions that's going to become very relative.
Okay.
Now,
sorry, I keep dwelling on these things, but I need my information.
You're fine.
Has he produced any evidence that he went to these schools? Degrees? No. Nothing like that.
I've never seen anything that's ever proven that he's went there. He says it. Basically, what he's saying is when crap hit the fan, which we will eventually get to also.
Yeah.
That he was basically erased, completely erased. And honestly, like if you used to ask me right now, give me proof that you went to high school at your specific high school, I don't think I could present proof of that.
Well, like on the fly, I couldn't present proof of going to university or anything. Like I've moved a number of times. I don't keep that stuff.
Right.
Now I
so
could
you would
get
go back
it.
to him. Yeah, you'd go back to get it, right?
Right, which is not an option for him.
Right. Because if the government comes in and goes, this person didn't exist or you die, you're going to choose that they didn't exist.
Yep.
Which is what happened coincidentally at Los Alamos. So when all of this started happening, I don't want to go too deep into it because we cover a little bit in the future, but when they went to interview him for a specific reason, they was like, this is just some whack job in the middle of nowhere saying that there's UFOs that exist. Let's check him out. The first place that he goes to is the schools. They can't find record of him.
Mm-hmm.
They say, where do you work? He says, I worked at Los Alamos National Laboratory.
Right.
They go there, no record of the guy. The funny part is then they start checking around and some of the things that was a publication, so not direct records or anything else, they find him. The way that they found the phone book was they started interviewing people within the organization and someone just happened to have an old phone book. That's how they found him in the phone book.
And that man is no more.
Correct. If you was to look at a phone book that was more newer in the company, he would not have been in there ever.
Right.
But someone just happened to have an old phone book. And here's the thing. They didn't say, hey, we're interviewing for this specific reason. They just went and go, I think the way it went, I believe, is they went in and they're like, hey, we're looking for like old phone books and directories. We're putting a report together and blah, blah, blah. And this person didn't know. They're like, yeah, here you go.
Right.
Now imagine who got fired after that.
Yeah, maybe worse than fired if this is a whole thing. Maybe he disappeared.
We're gonna cover some of that too.
Okay.
There's some deep stuff here, folks. There's some real deep stuff.
I'm gonna need a number of pages for this because I'm already half filled one.
Oh yeah, and we're 4 minutes into a 31-minute narration, Nick.
Yeah.
What are the questions you got?
I think for now I'm okay. I could lean both ways on a lot of these things because I'm just thinking in my mind, if I left my current company and they called them up 5 years later, is anyone even going to remember who I am? Like from the head office? Well, I don't know.
You're a doggone legend. What are you talking about?
I don't know about that. But
someone called for old Bert, they'd be like, oh my God, Bert was so awesome.
That's probably true. But I work for like a international organization, and the person at the head office probably doesn't even know about me right now.
Big enough
like
company,
the people who work with me directly might. But
and that could have been the case, right? Like they could have called this Los Alamos. They might not have even known who Bob Lazar was. It's such a big organization.
Yeah,
they just asked for
huge.
A phone book. Yeah, they just asked for. Think about it. It's a phone book. How many people do you have to have an actual phone book?
Exactly. So so I want to bring that up to be less skeptical about that, maybe.
But think about it also. There was a report that they wrote because what Bob used to do is he used to put a rocket booster on everything.
Right.
Literally everything. He put a rocket booster on a bicycle.
Oh, I'm surprised he didn't get horribly burned.
Actually, you can open those files now. There is actually a photo. And again, if you're not on the YouTube machine, I'm going to put on the YouTube machine. But if you're not on there on Instagram and Facebook, I'm going to put the photos. There's a picture of a bike that he built that has a rocket booster on the end of it.
Oh yeah, that looks pretty dangerous.
Yeah, it's kind of dangerous. But that was Bob Lazar. He also put a rocket booster in a small car. I forget what the brand of the car was. Very small car. I think there's a picture of that too. But I mean, just crazy stuff. Yeah, and there's the article. Now, the best part was when they called, nope, Bob Lazar never worked here. There's the newspaper article with Bob Lazar's car with a rocket on the end, and it said he's employed there.
Right. I mean, so I'm leaning with they either forgot him or there could be something going on here. It's intentional or it's not intentional. One of the two.
Here's the crazy part. They went to the hospital where he was born. Right. No record of him ever being born.
Okay, now that's something else entirely because they do not lose those records very casually.
They do not lose those on the fly.
Right.
So anything about Bob Lazar, period, does not exist.
No, nope,
he was
it
never
does
born.
Now. He's out there everywhere.
Oh, for sure. But there's a theory, which we'll be covering a little later, of why this occurred.
Okay.
All right, Nick, you ready for a little bit more info?
Yeah, I need to be spoon-fed this. It's a lot of information.
A lot of info. Here we go, baby.
Imagine a life forever altered. Such was the case for Bob in the late 1980s. A seemingly ordinary man living in Nevada, Bob was about to find himself navigating a reality that defies imagination. Bob tells us that he was approached with a job opportunity that seemed like science fiction materialized. A position so unbelievable it would make the Manhattan Project look like child's play. Recruited to work at a highly secretive base near the already perplexing Area 51, Lazar was ushered into a world that exists on the very fringes of scientific understanding. According to Bob, he couldn't just walk in. Before that, there were checks. Lots of them. Background checks to dig deep into who Bob was. He even had to swear to keep everything a secret. The work at S4 wasn't your regular 9-to-5 job. The place is so shrouded in secrecy that even its exact location is a matter of debate. But for Bob, the secrecy was real, very real. He felt it wrap around him like a cloak as he cleared each hurdle to enter this world. You might wonder why Bob, of all people, was chosen for such an extraordinary role. According to Bob, his past work in the scientific field caught the eyes of some very important people. And now, having sworn the oaths and passed rigorous background checks, he found himself standing at the door of what might as well have been another dimension.
This answered my next question right at the end.
Oh.
Why Bob? That was my next one.
So again, we're going to cover why he was there in the next segment. We're going to kind of break down why he was there. But for anyone that does not know the story, Bob had a very special series of skills. Now, if you let's pretend if you are the government at Area 51, where he worked was technically in Area 51, but it's not Area 51.
It was nearby, right?
Yeah. So it's actually called, it's Papoose Lake, which is Groom Lake is technically what it's known as, or where he was at is Groom Lake. But Papoose Lake, that I believe is where the facilities is, one of the two. He's at one of the two. So for anyone that doesn't know what Area 51 looks like, there's a mountain range that basically secludes most of the area. And then it's all desert. It's all basically a desert. It's like a sandy, it's sand everywhere, right? It's in the middle of nowhere. It's a desert. What they did, and we're going to cover this again here in the near future, is what Bob's story is that, hey, they offered me this job based on these skills that I have. Now, what have we talked about? For fun, this man put a rocket on a bicycle. For funsie.
Right.
Like, think about it. If I go and buy for something that I do, right, like podcasting, went and got a newer mic. I got a podcasting mic. We stepped it up. And that's not to say that I don't own mini mics, right? Like, I can reach right down. Here's another mic. I got another one over there. I've got mics all over the place. But depending on what I'm doing, right? Like, if I'm doing high-end audio, this is the mic. For podcasting, this one's a mic. So if I'm spending a series of dollars, it has to make sense. Bob is buying rocket boosters.
Right. Which probably caught some attention.
Oh, for sure. And then they're like, where are you putting this rocket booster at, right? Like, if it's a rocket booster, you putting it in a plane? No, I'm putting it on my bicycle. Who does that? Who does that? Bob Lazar does that. That's who it is.
He ended up on some kind of watch list.
Oh, I guarantee it. And they're like, this is the man we need.
Yeah.
But for years.
This might seem random, but I think they disappeared him before he started working there.
They could have. They very well could have.
Yep. You can't look up the employees of these special areas. I think they did that before, and they just didn't undo it afterwards.
They wouldn't have did it anyway, based on.
I don't think so.
Yeah, based on things that we will be covering, they couldn't have. So he says, well, he didn't tell anyone, but his story is he was at Area 51. They flew him into Area 51, but they had him at, I think it's Groom Lake. I think that's where he was. Papoose Lake is either part of it or it's near him also, because I keep hearing them reference that also. But he's like, hey, I went to this area. The buildings are spray painted the color of sand. So if you're looking directly at it, you don't see it.
That makes sense.
And there was a series of hangars. So he's described when crap hit the fan, he started doing these interviews. He told them all about it. They go to the government and the government starts laughing and they go, we've never had anything even remotely close to there. So Bob on a map drew, this is where I go to work every single day. Cause they're like, show us where you work. They're again, trying to disprove him. Since the government's like, there's nothing there. You can see satellite images. There's never been anything there.
Right.
They check it out. Nothing that they can ever find. There's nothing that ever proved it. So
I'd be like, take me there. Nothing
but you
there.
can't.
Take
It's
me
Area
there.
51. It's locked down, baby.
Yeah.
Can't
If
do
they're
it.
denying me though, if it's nothing there, just take me there.
It's the government. Government does what they want, man.
Yeah. They're not reasonable.
U.S. government, they don't care.
All governments. Not. Now I'm on a list. I'm
Probably
gonna
so,
just
but I know the
verify.
U.S. government, woo, baby, they're like, yep, nope, we don't know nothing about that. Nope,
Yep.
we're not talking.
Yep.
You're not going to talk about it either. No more.
Right.
So,
It's not like they were going to say, "Oh yeah, you guessed right, you win, you sunk my
right.
battleship."
You win.
You know they're going to say
Dang,
that.
Shucks, got us. Got us
Right.
on
This
that
is
one.
no kind of discredit at all. Like I could say this is where the White House is, and you're going to be like, "Nah, it ain't."
Correct. Correct. This guy's a whack job.
Yeah, yeah. And they did the same kind of thing to Stanton T. Friedman until he proved himself right as well. But that's a story for another time.
Well, see, and the reporter that was breaking this, his name was
Right.
George Knapp.
Oh, okay.
And
I've heard that
when
name.
well, he was a TV reporter. Like he was around for years. And they asked, Bob Lazar hunted him out.
Right.
Reporter didn't find Bob Lazar. Bob Lazar went to him and said, for a specific reason, we're going to cover it. I need you to help me with this.
Right.
And he was the one that started doing the research on this. Now, that being said, George was very prestigious when it came to reporting. Like he was very well known. He was part of the Las Vegas news reports is what he was. But he was like their guy, the guy in the field. So it's very interesting that, of course, all these things was said. Everyone went back, but this is where the smear campaign started.
Right.
Because the government's like, that doesn't even exist. And if it doesn't exist, how can you say you ever worked there?
Right. That's circular logic, though. You say it doesn't exist. I say it does.
Right. Government always wins, though. They're like the house at Vegas. Coincidentally, we're talking about Vegas. It's the house. The house always wins.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's like you can't ask them to prove it because they're just like, no.
Correct. This is secret, wardened off area that you're not allowed in.
Yeah. It's like arguing
we're
with a kid.
We're not going to divulge it, but we're telling you there's nothing there.
Yeah. It's like arguing with a kid. Like you can say the most logical thing and they're just like, no, it's not.
Nope.
I can see it right over there. No, you can't.
Nope. You don't see anything. That doesn't exist. I didn't draw on the walls. I don't know who did that.
Yeah.
Who did the ABCs on the wall? I don't know. Why would you even ask me for?
Yeah, I can't. I'm not going to prove that. Just believe me.
Why don't you believe me? Do you not love me no more?
That's right. U.S. government, do you not love us anymore?
That's the U.S. government right there. But the funny thing is when they asked him, okay, so you're a part of this organization, what field of government was it that you was a part of? Now, who do you think, and I'm sure you know about the U.S. government a little bit, Nick, if you was to guess when it comes to who would be covering this kind of research, who do you think it would be?
Military.
Yeah, but we got different branches, right? We got the Air Force.
Oh, Air Force, sorry.
That would make the most logical sense, right?
Yeah. Well, they're the only ones who could get things in and out of there. No?
It was the Navy. The United States Navy is who was bringing him in and out of that area.
So, man, that doesn't make any sense.
Makes zero sense.
Unless you consider where it might have come from. If this was like an ocean event, that would make sense.
Well, yeah. I mean, I guess I could see where you're going with that.
Yeah.
I mean, I understand that and honestly, I've got a buddy of mine that he would probably understand this significantly more. And he's probably at the end of this going to go, why didn't you call me before you had this podcast? I could explain this.
He should be calling us
he was
right
in
now.
the Army.
Just kidding.
Well, he was in the Army, and let me tell you, he's very efficient with understanding how all that works.
Right.
But yeah. Actually, I'm reading through my notes now. I finally found it. He claims that the said facility was adjacent to Papoose Lake, which is located south of the main Area 51 facility at Groom Lake.
Okay. Okay, there we go.
Yep. So basically he said when he was there, there's all these hangars, there's a couple of facilities. And what I was going into, I was going down into the bunkers of this. So it looked like a basic building, but there was bunkers that he was going down into.
Right.
So
you might not know this. If we were to go on Google Earth right now, what are we going to see over there? Nothing?
You know, I've not actually looked. I'm not sure. I think they still scramble the vast majority of that out.
Right. There is a huge section of, again, national park land near where I used to live that's just black.
Mm-hmm.
All around it is scanned, and you can see it from Google Earth, but this one part is just completely blacked out, and I'm wondering if that's what it's like for Area 51 too.
Well, I can tell you this much, Nick. I was amazed because I've got another topic that we've not covered yet. I'm still doing research on it. I've been doing this research on Bob, in which I've known about Bob Lazar for years, but I've been working on this specific episode for about 35 days now, just on and off.
Oh, wow.
Because I know when we was on episode 3, so the third episode that we did, which was Circleville Letters Part 1, I was already researching this.
I think around that time, or maybe a little earlier, we had talked at length outside of a podcast about this as well.
Correct. Oh, but what I was saying was another topic that I've been researching for a while also, I was going to do it until I found out is based out of Nova Scotia.
Oh, really? I'm not going to guess what it is because I could probably guess.
Very good chance that you would, but you've never mentioned it ever. Never once have you ever mentioned it.
Should I say one word?
You can.
Boat?
Nope.
Oh?
Nope.
Island?
Nope.
Oh, okay. Maybe
Cold.
not then.
Way cold.
Oh, well, I guess I'll have to wait and see. Or look up everything in my province. Just
I was surprised. When I was doing research, the vast majority of it comes out of Nova Scotia. The vast majority.
Really weird.
Like so much of it comes out of Nova Scotia.
Huh. No,
and I didn't even know it was in Nova Scotia. I thought it was in the States.
Oh, well, we're part of a lot of mysteries because we're strange folk up here.
I didn't even know you guys well, I'm not going to say it. That might be a different episode. There's something else about up there that I had no clue about until I started research. I'm like, how has Nick never mentioned these things?
I don't know it all. Maybe. It depends. Like, I know a lot of things, but there's literally tens of thousands of stories of strange occurrences here.
There really is. And this one is this episode. I can't wait to do it because I'm going to pick your brain to see if you know about it or if you've experienced it.
Oh, really? Interesting.
It could be something you have experienced, Nick.
Interesting. Maybe so.
I'm super excited. But the reason I say that is that I could see why there's a ton of stuff hidden in your area. Like it totally makes sense. There's so much stuff that goes on there. It's crazy. But Area 51, I know that they was blurring out a lot of those images years ago. I've not been there recently.
We'll have to check it out after.
For sure. You ready to dive on a little further, Nick?
I sure am. Let's bring it on.
Let's go.
On his first day, he wasn't led to a cozy office with a view. No, Bob found himself descending into the bowels of the facility where the real work, the unimaginable work, was set to begin. Picture endless hallways, veiled rooms, and a sense of urgency in the air that was palpable. Bob's task was laid out to him clearly. His mission was so far removed from ordinary science that it bordered on the realm of science fiction. He was to reverse engineer technology that was, quite literally, not of this world. Imagine being handed a machine and being told it's from another planet. How would you even begin to understand it, let alone take it apart and figure out how it works? According to Bob, his initial reaction was one of disbelief combined with an academic's natural curiosity. The hardware, as it was vaguely termed, looked alien, felt alien, and by all accounts was alien. As he immersed himself in the work, he began to realize the monumental nature of his task. Each day was a new puzzle, a mystery wrapped in layers of even more bewildering questions. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. The facility became a second home to Bob, or perhaps a parallel universe of sorts. Here, he delved into technology that defied our known laws of physics. Things like gravity manipulation and propulsion techniques that have never been seen on Earth before. As time went on, the weight of the secrets he carried became heavier. But Bob pressed on, fueled by a ceaseless desire to unlock the mysteries that had been entrusted to him. It was as if he had been handed the keys to the universe, but with no instruction manual.
That's a lot.
That's a lot of info.
That is a lot. So I can sort of see why they brought him in, because he
was a propulsion guy.
Right, and he was obsessed with it. This is the kind of guy you want. Someone who does it at the lab, goes home, does it on his free time. And buying all that material probably ended him up on a bunch of lists as well. So
correct.
All right, so that makes a lot of sense. Is it too soon to ask how long he was there?
No, so he was there. So are we talking about what does he say? Or because even he says that he wasn't like going there working every single day. So this wasn't, he was going in Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Fridays, off Saturday, Sunday.
Okay.
Basically, they would call him one day and be like, we need you today.
Okay.
He would go in, he would work. And then
so like contract work then, I'm thinking.
Somewhat, yeah. Now, the big difference was when he got there, he may not have been able to leave for a few days.
Right. And I've heard that kind of thing before from other guys.
Oh, for sure. And typically when we're talking top secret clearance stuff with any kind of national security, they're basically going to tell you, we own you. So when you say you're here, when we say you're here, you're here. And you're not leaving until we tell you you're done.
Right.
But when he first started there, very limited information. His days were relatively short. And the way that he tells the story is he gets there. He doesn't truly understand what his job is.
Right.
They've been very vague with it. Day one, they take him down into the bowels of the facility. They put books in front of him and they say, read this.
Right. Were these special books or is this just?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Now, this is after they cleared him. So at this point, they've already cleared him. They've done all these background checks. According to him, this is where speculation comes into play. So I can't, as much as I would love to say this happened, there's no proof of this. This is one man's story.
Right.
They set the manuals in front of him. Then they come to him at the end of it. And according to him, they put guns to his head and say, if you ever repeat any of this, we think you understand what's going to happen.
If I'm to believe any of the story, I would have to believe that. So they're probably
it doesn't
still
sound false.
No, they're probably testing him at this point. They're giving him manuals and maybe see when he leaves if he tells anyone.
Oh, for sure. And this was something that he brought up because a lot of times people say, what was in the manuals? And he goes, it doesn't really matter what's in the manuals. And a lot of people will question him, well, why did you read it? And he goes, honestly, I didn't know what the manuals was all about. It was in his mind, it was one of four things.
Right.
This is not in the future, so it's cool that we cover this.
Yeah.
His thought number one was, if I have to read all these manuals, maybe they're throwing some stuff in there to see what I can remember after I've read the manuals and what I can retain.
Right.
Because there was information in there that's not just reading at a, fifth grade level.
Yeah.
This is advanced stuff.
Yeah. This might be a comprehension test.
Oh, yeah. So he's like, maybe they're just trying to see how much I can retain. That was his first thought.
Right.
Second thought was, above and beyond the retention, was comprehension.
Right.
We're throwing all this information. Are you able to decipher the information that you would not know anything about?
Right.
And how can you apply it?
Okay.
That's number 2.
Right.
Number 3 was he wanted to see, or they wanted to see if they provide him with the information and then later the information got leaked. His information, they can go back. Maybe each person's information is different. And when they hear a keyword, they go, that was only in Bob Lazar's. He's our guy.
That's right. And that's exactly, if I were one of these shady government guys, that's exactly what I'd do. Exactly.
For sure. The fourth thought process for him was they hand him all of the manuals.
Mm-hmm.
And then they've already done recognition, comprehension. They've done, obviously, the fake story. But the fourth one is to see, is there some part of his life that he can look at the information and go, because of this part of my life, I know that this is true or that is true. So his thought process is they brought him in as a one-time gig to try to pinpoint one thing.
Yeah.
And then they was going to be done with him.
Right. But he passed, I guess.
I mean, no one knows. No one knows what the manuals were for. It could still be for any of those 4 reasons.
So he won't say what was in them at all.
He does.
Does he? Oh, okay. Okay.
But he doesn't go into deep. Like his theory is now when people interview him on him, he goes, it doesn't truly matter. Even if I told you everything that's there, it could all be lies. I don't know.
Yeah. And I'm cool with that. What I'm trying to get at. So this is all fantastical knowledge.
Oh, yeah.
Like this isn't just science textbooks or manuals. This is stuff that you read this and you're like, this is completely out of my realm of experience. I know the terms you're using, but
the way that he explained it, and this is kind of where I went with the narration.
Right.
It's basically they handed him an owner's manual of something he's never seen before, or what their hypothesis was, and said, explain it to us. Right. So everything he looked at, he had never experienced before.
Okay. Okay.
And the interesting thing about Bob Lazar is he didn't even care about 3/4 of it.
Right.
You know what he cared about?
What?
The jet propulsion stuff.
Yeah. So he was real focused on this.
Hyper focused. Like I would almost put him borderline autistic.
Right.
You know how sometimes autistic people can focus and zoom their brain into one thing?
Hyperfixation with a single topic.
Yeah. That is Bob Lazar. Every interview I've ever seen with this man, hyper focused on the technology. When people ask about the other nuanced stuff, he almost seems annoyed because he's like, you're not getting the big picture.
Yeah, you're not focused on what matters. It's
right.
Right. Okay. All right. And I think that's specifically why they probably kept him. This is probably what they're looking for. If
anything, my thought process at this stage, now I'm not saying that I won't change this theory later, but at this stage in my research, what I thought was they brought this guy in because he's a propulsion guy.
Right.
If they handed him this alien whatever, now you got to understand, he hasn't seen crafts at this point. They've literally just handed the manual.
Yeah.
They're just trying to pick his brain.
Okay.
I heard someone say the same equivalent. It's like throwing a cell phone into an orangutan cage and seeing if they figure out how to open apps.
Right.
Eventually, an ape's going to figure out how to get the phone to go to an app and then play with the app.
Yeah.
Their theory is we have all these scientists that have all these huge backgrounds. This guy who's been throwing rockets, he's not a scientist. He has a science background.
Right.
But that's not his field of expertise.
Yeah.
He's a rocket guy. Let's throw him this information, just see what he does with it.
Another benefit of that is if he's hyperfixated on the propulsion part, who knows what other stuff he saw and just filed it away as unimportant. Like there could be medical documents in there, detailing alien bodies. And he's just like, that's nothing to do with rockets at all.
we're going to cover some of that stuff in this, Nick.
Okay.
He talks about it, but he doesn't care about it.
He doesn't care.
He told someone in an interview, I forget what, I don't think it was Rogan. I think it was an older interview. And he's sitting there talking about this technology. Yeah. And the guy's like, yeah, well, let's talk about, and I can't fill it in because it's coming up, but let's talk about blah. And he's like, can we just go back to the propulsion? The guy's like, yeah, why is it every time we bring up this topic that you don't ever want to talk about it? Almost makes you look shady. And he goes, shady about something that I don't even know is real. Let's talk about the stuff that we know is real.
Yeah. Yeah. Like this is it would be like asking Neil deGrasse Tyson what his thoughts are on, special gastronomy and stuff like that. What's the best way to cook an egg? Like, he'd just be like, why are you asking me this? Like, this is
like a great example. They've asked him questions like that before. If you look at Neil deGrasse Tyson, he gets annoyed with those questions too, because he's like, who cares? Like, it's irrelevant. It doesn't even matter.
Yeah, who cares what I think about this topic? I'm an expert in this field. Ask me questions about this field.
And that's literally Bob Lazar. In all of this is Bob Lazar. Bob Lazar, listen, in my field of expertise, what I do for a living, when it comes down to what I specialize in, I have to read people for a living. That's my job. When I look at Bob Lazar as a person, I go, I know this person. Like, I totally understand what he's doing and why he's doing it. Mm-hmm. Now, is there an ulterior motive behind it? Maybe. That's why when I do the research, my narrative is probably weird, because in the beginning, I'm trying to prove it's fake. Like that's my goal. As someone who loves these stories, my first initial thought is, can I shoot this down? Because if I can shoot it down, and I believe probably more than like even Nick's for sure going to shoot it down.
Right. Part of my job is to be suspicious. So I'm coming at it like, I wish it was real, but 9 times out of 10, it's probably not.
I had a conversation with someone the other day. I said, you and I are probably the best balance for a podcast like this, because our personalities are so significantly different.
Right.
I mean, the hypothesis for the New Jersey Devil last week, if it was me by myself or you by yourself, I don't think we would have came to that hypothesis at the end of the podcast.
Definitely not. Definitely not.
Because we've done that talking about it back and forth. Oh, yeah. Because we talked about it back and forth. We came up to that last hypothesis. I wish we would have caught that on camera, man. I wish we would have figured that out. But it's like, I thought about it after that. I'm like, there's no way I would have came to that thought process had Nick not brought up X, Y, and Z.
I definitely didn't. And that was my story. I never connected it to that. Now, I know a lot about that missing 411, but I never connected that to this until you said something that triggered that.
It's just amazing. This is why people with different backgrounds have to have conversations. You can't be in an echo chamber of just people that you know, because you never learn anything outside of what you see.
That's right. That's right. And that happens to a lot of people on the internet end up in these echo chambers, like you said, because the algorithm on Facebook is the worst example of this, and Twitter and stuff. It shows you more of what you like. And what you like is generally what you believe, until it's filtered everything out.
Old Twitter. They've changed that.
Oh, have they? Okay.
Yep. Elon Musk said that he was tired of people just arguing the same valid points amongst each other.
Right.
So now part of the artificial intelligence that he brought in also puts things that he knows you're going to dislike in your timeline.
Oh, okay.
And people have gotten ticked off on both sides, because they're like, I don't want to hear this idiot.
Right.
And Elon Musk just finds it funny.
I think that you should see all sides of it.
Me too. Like, you guys can tell me all day long, Bert's an idiot and here's why. I'll listen. I'll listen. If you got something valid at the end, I'm like, got me there. Like, I don't know. Like, they are probably right. Maybe I'm wrong on this. But listen, we don't grow and we don't move to new things if we don't have those conversations.
Right. Now, they don't have to come at people like attacking them. But
you should never do that.
You've always, The one thing I love about science is that you always have to be open to having your mind changed. What we believe to be fact today might not be tomorrow, and we always got to consume the new evidence, consume the new tests, and change what our opinion is on things. And that's how people should be in real life.
Agreed. I feel like science doesn't do enough of that, though. And we talk about that a lot, even in these cases. It's
Right.
like, as a believer, right?
Mhm.
Especially when we talk about ghosts and stuff, the first thing they go is, we'll prove it. And then we bring things like EMF detectors, or we bring,
Right.
audio when it comes to EVPs and stuff like that. And they go,
Mhm.
it was the wind, or it was this, or it was
It's
that.
owls.
It's a freaking owl. Exactly. Unfortunately, I couldn't tie an owl to the Bob Lazar story. I really wanted to, but I
Yeah.
couldn't. But, that's the thing, is it's almost like we have to, in my opinion, we've always had to be the one to prove
Right.
that ghosts exist, because science say that they can't. You're dead.
Yeah.
You're gone. There's nothing residual.
I think the main problem that people run into is when you get scientists showing up at these events, there's no funding for that. So these are
Right.
guys that are generally, and I'm speaking generalizations here, but they're not the cream of the crop, the ones trying to cure
Right.
cancer. Like, these are a lot of times hobbyists. And that's not to say they haven't got great points, because this is something that people say all the time. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. So,
Agreed.
but dismissing things offhand, not right.
Oh, yeah. You have to open it up. You have to see all sides to have any
Yeah.
kind of concept or idea what you got going on. If you don't have all the sides, good luck.
Yeah, for sure. We should always consider everything.
Correct.
And both sides
Well,
get that
Nick-
wrong. But anyway, go ahead.
The next part's going to dive into what he was working with.
Okay. This is what
You
I
wanna
need to
hear?
know. Yeah.
Yes, this is
give
the
me
part
this.
I guarantee everyone has been looking forward to.
All right.
Before we proceed down the winding path of Bob's moral and ethical dilemmas, let's take a moment to focus on the work, the unbelievable task that was laid before him. According to Bob, he wasn't just poking around in a government storage closet full of dusty files and outdated equipment. No, what he claims to have encountered was technology so advanced it defied conventional understanding. Bob speaks of 9 saucer-like crafts. Yes, you heard it right, 9. Not 1 or 2, but 9 distinct crafts, each a silent testament to technology so advanced that it pushes the boundaries of human imagination. According to Bob, upon entering the heavily guarded hangars at S4, his eyes met with a collection of saucer-like crafts. Each one, in his words, seemed to come from a different mold, as if they were prototypes or models of different eras or, dare we say, different civilizations. He describes one as being like what popular culture would call a flying saucer, complete with a central dome. But others were unique elongated forms, discs with jagged edges, a craft that seemed to shimmer as if trying to blend with its surroundings. It was a gallery of otherworldly design, each craft an artwork of incomprehensible genius. What gripped Bob most were the interiors. Stripped of seats, switches, or any familiar mechanisms, these crafts presented an unsettling simplicity. It's as if the crafts themselves were singular units, empty of assembled parts, machined from a material unknown to Earth. Each craft, it seemed, had its own distinct propulsion system. While some appeared to manipulate gravitational fields, others were just mysterious, defying classification under Earth's known laws of physics. Bob was particularly focused on what he identified as a reactor, an orb that exuded a spectrum of colors, pulsating as if alive, generating a field that defied gravity.
There's a lot there. I barely got done writing.
I tried to chop these up, Nick, because I know it's a lot of info, especially on
Right.
this. I knew that.
Well, by necessity, it has to be. Like, for
Oh,
this to be
yeah.
any kind of story at all, we need these details. So I'll go through the things that struck me as really interesting or bizarre. So the interiors were surprisingly simple. So no switches, I didn't think they said even seats or anything, right? Or were they
So-
stripped out?
It depended on the aircraft.
Right.
or the spacecraft, I guess you should say. There is a model. So there was 9 crafts. Now, to understand how this worked, he didn't work on all 9 crafts.
Right.
He worked on one craft.
Right.
Now, he saw the other crafts. The way he explains it is on the first day that he was like an employee, not a guy they brought in to read these manuals and yada, yada, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
They brought him on a more full-time basis. So they take him around back and they put him basically through the hangars, not going through the front doors, through the hangars, through the back doors. When they're taking him through those back hangars, so the way the hangars were, they were all back to back to back to back to back. So
right.
if you're thinking of a hangar, the sides touched each other. Okay. When they're walking him through, all the hangar doors are open.
Oh, they're just open.
Yeah. So every single hangar, there was a specific UFO in that hangar, is what he states.
Right.
So the way he explained it is each one was like a different model.
Yeah. Different civilization, I think it said.
Or potentially even the thought process like a whole different civilization. He doesn't know, right? He's just speculating. He even in one interview used the analysis of it could be anything from, like going to the Toyota line and buying a mid-sized car like a Camry, or going and buying a minivan.
Right.
So I definitely understand his thought process on that, but he said it could also be something as much as like different civilizations of alien aircraft.
Well, the different propulsions makes me think, it's likely that it could be that.
And it very well could be. Now, something that I found interesting we're going to cover, so don't let me forget it. Remind me of propulsion. Right. Gravity propulsion. Remind me of that.
Right.
So he's there. He assumes that they ran him by the aircrafts.
Right.
So he could see bigger picture.
Okay.
Now he says as he was walking through the hangars, he reached out and he touched the UFO and then put his hand back. Now he had not interacted, touched, or anything up to this point. He said the guards that was behind him shoved him into the building and told him don't ever touch anything again unless he's told to.
Right.
So he goes in, and long story short, obviously, after he's been in there, they bring him in and they go, we want you to specialize on this one propulsion system. This is what we want you to try to concentrate on. Now, there's probably a question that you're going to ask. I'm probably going to answer that now. It's not the narrative, so it's fine. Why are they bringing Bob in? Obviously, we explained it based on his technology, but they didn't have a propulsion guy before.
Yeah.
They had a propulsion guy before.
Okay.
In the midst of trying to understand this propulsion system, he believed, based on stories that he heard from his new friend that was there, they were trying to cut into it with a plasma cutter, he believes. The man was instantly killed.
Ooh.
Instantly.
That is serious. That makes me less want to work on this project if I was him.
Like Bob said, I'm not cutting into anything with a plasma cutter. Can guarantee. Yeah. But the way these aircraft, his specific aircraft he talks the most about, there's 2 that he talks about. One that's a sport model is what he calls it.
Sport model, okay.
And one that he calls just the conventional aircraft. Now, you asked the questions, was there no seats? In his had seats.
Okay.
The sports model, as he refers to it, did not have seats.
Now, were they taken out or they just never had them?
He doesn't know.
Okay.
And everyone says, well, did you ever ask questions? And he laughs every single time. And he goes, you don't ask questions. The government doesn't tell you what the other person's working on.
Right.
They only tell you what you work on. You answer those questions and you talk amongst yourselves.
Yeah. Very compartmentalized. I've heard that before. Even in regular government business, that's how that works.
Correct. So what he said was, which is what I found very interesting, and we're going to come back around to that propulsion thing I have not forgotten. When he was finally allowed to reach in and then pull himself up on the aircraft or the spacecraft, and then he said he tucked himself in to look into the propulsion systems.
Right.
He said each of the sections in the UFO, there's multiple floors
Okay.
to the
So
UFOs.
this is big.
Yeah, it's not just one small section.
Right.
But he said that it was made for something that was about 3 to 4 foot tall.
Oh, really? Okay.
There were seats in his model, and that was it. There was basically like these things that you would put your hands on
Right.
that would work the propulsion systems.
Okay.
No wires, no lighting. There was no switches, no screens. There
Right.
was nothing.
Well, see, that opens a lot of other questions because when you're going through space, you can't just drive like a car. You've got to have some pretty serious navigation. So where's the feedback for that coming from?
So there's some hypotheses that we're going to come into later.
Okay.
I don't want to bridge quite that gap just yet because there's some information that will come in handy.
Okay.
We're probably like 2 or 3 segments from that. So don't forget that question.
All right. I've got it.
An interesting thing that he did mention, though, when he was talking about these spacecrafts, someone asked him in an interview, they said, and I can't remember what interview it is. I've seen so many. They said, so you're telling me there's this spacecraft. What was it made out of? And he goes, I don't know.
Right. Something that kills you if you touch
With
it
a plasma
too much.
cutter. Well, that's specific. So the propulsion system is what killed him when they cut into the propulsion. So the rest of the UFO, he said one of the UFOs, when he walked up to it and when he walked past it, he saw a gouge in the side that looked like something had hit it and destroyed it.
Okay.
But just a section, like not the entire thing was destroyed, just a small section.
Right.
Now he said whether it was found like that,
Mm-hmm.
whether we shot it down, whatever it was, that was the way that aircraft was. He said it could have been
Right.
completely intact and we trying to figure out how things work cut into it. He said, I don't know.
Right. Yeah, they're not going to give them that kind of background information.
He said when he was inside the spacecraft, though, because at one point they let him in,
Right.
somebody figured out that when they did a series of things, almost like what would you call it? Not a doorway, but like an archway in the space, it would turn opaque.
Okay.
And you could see through it like a portal.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So this is just a feeling I've got about it. It's not a particular question, but imagine the kind of backbone you've got to have to go into this thing with 4-foot ceilings that could, as far as you know, it could seal itself at any time. They can't cut you out. You're in there for good. There's no controls for you to try to get out. Like, that's what I'd be thinking when I crawled up in there, especially the 4-foot ceilings.
I have an interesting hypothesis on all of this.
Okay. The too
I
early?
know exactly where you're going.
Oh, okay.
You can keep going, though. It's interesting.
Oh, no. It's okay. You can tell me. Or is it too early?
It's too early. I can't quite give it to you yet. Tell me
That's
what you
keep
think. and then-
saying, too early.
Mhm.
Well, I sort of, this is not what you're thinking, but I was thinking that one of two things. It's either got to have some kind of psychic control. It's got to have, you must have seen Interstellar, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Where they could manipulate gravity almost like controls. So that's one other thing I was thinking. Or the other one, it could be running off of like Siri or Alexa. You just tell it what you want.
Something that was interesting that he said, and it's not in the narrative.
Right.
When he was there,
Mm-hmm.
other countries was coming there to research the same UFOs.
Right.
He said on one specific time frame. So he went to work one day, he was off for a series of days, and he came back. He said that one of the groups of people made a huge discovery.
Oh, really?
Absolutely huge. And they don't tell each other, so they don't talk. But the way that he knew that they made a huge discovery, they had a series of Russian researchers that was there. The moment they discovered it, they kicked them out. They didn't want them to be there. Yeah.
We have no idea what it was.
He has no clue.
Oh, okay.
He honestly has no clue. He said that he wished he knew because it was such a, he said it had to be huge because one day all the Russians are in there providing their thought processes. Next day, they're gone.
Right.
There was no, hey, take a couple days, get your stuff. It's get your stuff out and go now.
And that's super suspicious. That almost makes me think that they learned how to operate it in its entirety or were on the way to doing it.
Well, the interesting thing that he brought up, and this is where I was going to, when we talk about the propulsion, he talks about anti-gravity propulsion systems.
Right.
I've actually got it here in my notes. Hold on. Let me jump over to my notes. My doggone notes has all the good stuff. When we talk about Bob Lazar and this anti-gravity, it's very interesting what he goes through and his hypothesis, because again, he doesn't know.
Right.
But the interesting thing is he had a couple of concepts that he thinks make sense.
Okay. Well, that's good because he's just been bringing us questions. I want some answers. Yeah.
Well, see, and they brought it to him because they wanted him to reverse engineer it. That was his goal. But they already had certain keys in place. So when he talks about this anti-gravity, his hypothesis is that you've got a space shuttle or a spaceship. I got to stop saying shuttle. Spaceship. Right. And the way that it works is it creates its own gravity field. Okay. Now, what makes it interesting is the scientific community has always said that the way that gravity works is its mass, right? They talk about mass. More mass you have, more gravity you have.
More attraction.
That is gravity.
Yep.
Bob Lazar in 1989 or 1990 stated the gravity was not as we saw it. We understand it as mass, but the gravity based on that technology was based on waves.
Okay.
And the way he explained it is it's like a surfer. You go out and you ride the waves, right?
Right.
What these anti-gravity propulsion systems were doing is it was creating gravity, which around the ship was causing almost like a force field within reason.
Okay.
So what it would do is the spaceship would sit, and of course you guys won't be able to see this, but for those of you listening, I'll try to explain it. It's like, think about a car. Let's do that. Yep. Car's got four wheels sit on the ground. To move it forward, we just point the nose towards where we go and we turn. The way he explained it is these space shuttles, to go to where they're going, would flip on its side. The underbelly of the spaceship would go point the direction that it was supposed to be. It would create gravity that would then take it between three dimensions of all these dimensions we say there are.
Right.
And it locks onto the destination at this slightly faster than the speed of light. Okay. So there's no force, there's no restrictions. Now, where this comes into play in conversations we've had before, oh my God, they just scared me. Something popped up on my computer. That was the scariest thing that's happened to me so far. But the way that we talked about Shag Harbor, remember?
Right. Yeah.
We said the UFO went into what? The water.
Right.
Right. We said, how could it be in the water? If the spacecraft is creating its own gravity, is creating its own force field.
Right.
It doesn't matter what plane it is because dimensionally it's locking itself within multiple dimensions.
Right. So it can be anywhere.
It can literally be anywhere.
Right.
But the fact that it's spinning itself and then locking with the underbelly and flying there.
Yeah.
So what makes this interesting, the whole reason I told you the story, in 2016,
Mm-hmm.
science determined by looking at two black holes,
Right.
gravity was not as we saw it as a mass. But how do you think they determined it was created?
Oh, it's got to be waves then, huh?
In waves. The first time
Okay.
the scientific community ever stated that gravity was, thanks to these two black holes that we was watching, was waves
Right.
and not mass as we had predicted before. Bob Lazar said this in 1989 or 1990.
Okay. And just to be skeptical, that's recorded, right?
Yes.
That he said it at that time? Okay.
Correct. Yeah, there's actually I think it's in that documentary. It's in a documentary that I can't remember the guy that created the documentary.
Yeah.
It's called like Bob Lazar Area 51 and Unidentified Flying Objects or something like that. But
Okay.
it's interesting because he said, and the reason that it's so well documented is the scientific
Right.
community made fun of him.
Right. Well, I guess they
That's
must
why
have
it was
felt silly
documented.
after that.
But think about it. This is 1989. 2016 is when
Right.
we truly determined that was correct. And they didn't even come out with it. They're like, brand new discovery, blah, 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 blah. And then everyone that followed Bob Lazar said, wait a second, isn't that what Bob said?
Hmm.
And then people
I'm
go back.
curious.
Mhm.
We're not going to know this, but I'm curious how he determined that.
It was in part of the manuals that we was talking about.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So they had already known somewhat how some of this worked based on things that they have acknowledged. Now, another thing
Right.
that's interesting is when we talk about the UFO almost going on its side and pointing its underbelly towards stuff,
Right.
the new UFO footages that if you look at
Mhm.
like the Tic Tacs and all that stuff,
Yeah.
it does the same thing.
Oh, really?
Now, another thing, if you look at it, it usually looks like it's skipping.
Right.
So when you're looking,
is
it's
that
like
the
skip, skip,
wave,
skip, skip,
or-
skip. What they're explaining is that's the gravity wave and it's moving between the dimensions.
Okay.
So it's not going in a straight line. It's technically riding that gravital wave.
Interesting.
I don't know that that's a word. I may have created that word, gravital.
Gravital wave. Well, I'm not going to doubt you this time.
Listen, I don't know.
Yeah.
That sounds a little sus even to me, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that didn't work out for me last time, though. So I'm going to bet
Nigga
with you
ain't
this
taking no
time.
chances, boys.
Yeah,
So-
that's right.
Yeah. So, I mean, we're talking 1989 or 1990 to 2016, and they determined they're not saying Bob was right,
Right.
but they're saying more than likely gravity is not based on mass. Mass is a thing. So,
Right.
Like,
It's
if you look at
it's
the
got to
moon-
be a factor because we can sort of
Oh,
prove
for sure.
that, you know.
science has basically said there's something to it, but they don't understand
Right.
exactly what it is. But they know it's a wave, not necessarily mass. Because what they're saying is
Yeah.
the way that we came up with all of this, obviously Newton,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
But when we determined when we got to the moon is 1/16 of the Earth,
Right.
but it has like 1/6 of the Earth's gravity.
Hmm.
So what they're saying is, well, again, the Earth is versus the moon significantly bigger. That's how gravity
Right.
works. And we can somewhat create fake gravity within reason
Right.
when we create a lot of mass, but it takes significant amounts for the gravity field to get into that point. And we can somewhat do that by accelerating that mass. It creates somewhat of like a force.
Right.
But when we started studying these two black holes that were close to each other, they said, yeah, gravity is not what we think it is.
Okay.
That's been since 2016. That's a pretty significant breakthrough for Bob. I put 1 point in
Oh, yeah.
Bob's category just based on that.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, that's a pretty big deal. And with it pointing in different directions, like out in space, up, down, left, right is all meaningless, really.
It's
Like-
irrelevant. Yeah. The way that
Right.
he explained it is there's 3 propulsion systems. There's 2 that's underneath and 1 that's above.
Right.
And the way he explains it, the top of the aircraft almost has what he would consider a computer they're equivalent to a computer or they're equivalent as a navigation.
Right.
And he's not sure. And the reason that he comes up with that is there's a series of black, he calls them porthole looking things.
Okay.
And there's no
I can
reason
see
for
that
them to
on
be
the
there.
picture.
Yeah. So, and for anyone that doesn't know, I created based on a diagram of what Bob Lazar drew a picture of when they first interviewed him. And I'll put the picture of the diagram in there. I had one of our AI detection systems create a picture of what that diagram would have been. And you can see these black, almost like windows or portholes at the top of the spaceship.
Yeah. But probably not windows because of the other part you mentioned where things can.
Correct. He said, yeah, those are always there. He says those never go away.
On all the models?
Just on the specific one he worked on. He wasn't able to get super close to most of them. He said when he saw them, they were typically from a distance.
Oh, okay.
And you got to understand, these things are super tall. Think about it. If you have one UFO and it's 3 floors, even if it's like 5 foot, that's still 15 foot. And they're already hovering.
Yeah. Yeah, these things would be massive. I mean, all the sightings you see, people are seeing them from quite a distance, and they'd have to be massive to be seen at all.
Oh, for sure.
I would assume. Because you think of like a commercial aircraft, you can just barely see them up in the sky sometimes, and they are huge. Right. So these would have to be massive.
Correct. So far, 1 point for Bob Lazar, in my personal opinion.
Right. Yeah, if he predicted that, that's like 10 points to me.
What is it?
I got to go look at the science after, though.
But think about it. What is it we always say? There has to be substantial proof if there's no way for somebody to know something. In this case, we're talking about a scientific hypothesis that had never came up. Right. He was just looking at propulsion.
He was the first guy. Yeah.
And the way that he says it gets up to, higher than the speed of light, one of the gravity creating anti-gravity is pulling towards where they're going. Another one's pushing away, and another one's kind of guiding the direction.
Okay. That makes sense in my not so scientific mind, I guess. I don't know the science behind this, but
another interesting thing, and we've talked about this before, is how does your body not get completely scrambled up inside this thing at those kind of speeds? He said that there's some sort of almost like a protectant on the inside that you do not sense any movement at all.
Oh, I think that'd be very easy to do if you could control gravity the way that they do. Like you could make it no motion whatsoever, I'm sure.
Correct. He said that there's no wiring though. There's no panels. The only thing there is in one of the seats is a thing to where you can move around some of the gravity propulsion things. And the way he explained those anti-gravity propulsions, he said it looked like a trash can with a pipe on top of it attached to the ship.
Oh.
But it's inside of the ship, so you don't see it on the outside. It's on the inside. Yeah. So it's creating the gravity on the inside of the ship that then surrounds the ship.
In a trash can. No, just kidding.
Yeah, in a trash can, exactly.
Meanwhile, it's just
solved.
Meanwhile, that was just put in there by a maintenance man. and he just forgot to take it out of there. He was like sweeping
totally forgot to take it out. You ready to move on to the next spot, Nick, or you got some questions?
No, let's hit the next one. I'm gathering so many questions, but he mostly doesn't have answers for me.
Good stuff's about to come, Nick.
All right, let's hit it.
But where did these otherworldly crafts come from? How did they come into the possession of the U.S. government? Bob gives us tantalizing clues. One craft, he reveals, was discovered during an archaeological dig. A team of scientists and excavators were unearthing relics of a long-gone civilization when they stumbled upon something that belonged not in the past, but perhaps in the future. An object so advanced, it defied explanation. Bob doesn't tell us where this dig took place or who was responsible for it. The details remain clouded in secrecy, but the implications are staggering. As for the remaining 8 crafts, Bob is less forthcoming. But let's ponder for a moment. Could they be the remnants of crashed unidentified flying objects, secretly salvaged by government agents in operations we can barely imagine? Or were they gifts, perhaps, left for us to find by visitors from another world? Bob leaves these questions unanswered, adding more layers to a mystery that continues to baffle and intrigue us.
So imagine this, Nick.
Oh boy.
I'm going to use, there's no verifiable proof to what I'm about to spew.
We know this. This is hearsay, a lot of this.
Let's say you're in Egypt, right?
Right.
And you're like, I'm like, hey, Nick, guess what? Listen, we're about to uncover this vase that we found from the Egyptian dynasty. And then someone goes, Bert? And I go, I'm talking to Nick. Hold on. We're talking about this vase. Hold on.
Yeah, don't be rude.
Like, Bert, no, so you got to tell Nick to stick. Bert, come here. And I go over and I'm like, dude, I'm talking to Nick. And they're like, what is this? And I'm like, oh my God, it's like Flight of the Navigator up in this mug. Could you imagine?
That.
Could you imagine? They just they're sitting there with their little brushes. And I can almost imagine, again, pure speculations. They like brushing. It goes.
They clearly weren't looking for that.
No, they wasn't looking for it at all. They just found it at an archaeological dig. And he doesn't say where. But how crazy would that be?
That spooks me out. That scares the living bejesus out of me.
And it's
thinking
like
that these things could be anywhere.
Oh, yeah. But here's the thing. It's like you could create any kind of story. If you're Bob Lazar, you could create any kind of story. Listen, this came from X, Y, and Z. They came down. They crashed. That's how we got it. He's like, nah, in this story, we literally was on an archaeological dig, found this aircraft. Now, everyone's asking him, well, tell us more. And he's like, yeah, it doesn't really matter. That spaceship was this one, and this is what it did. And they're like, no, like we want to know this. We want to know this. Bob could have cared less.
Yeah.
But because he did it so nonchalantly, it's like, of all the crazy stories, that's not the one I think I would have told if I'm him.
Right. I'll tell you one thing about Bob. If you ever hear this, I think you're super interesting, but I would slap the life out of you. You sound super infuriating. It's like, I don't want to talk about that.
Questions.
I need to know things, and he don't want to talk about it.
Well, in the next section we're going to go over, Nick, he drops an absolute bombshell.
He's sort of leading us along, Nick. Breadcrumbs.
And people get super ticked off that he doesn't talk more about that next section. And on top of it, it's not the first time we've heard that section.
Right. Okay.
So, but it was very interesting. He's like, yeah, there's this architectural dig. We found the space shuttle, and everyone was like, you found it in an archaeological dig? And he goes, yeah. So we found it anyway. They were, yeah. It's like, what? Are you serious?
That's an important part of the story.
That's the best part of the story so far.
This is Stargate.
Like, because then for me, it opens up, which we'll never have answers to. It's like, was there an advanced civilization? Because of time, the earth has changed and is buried. Maybe there's an entire civilization underneath the ground there.
Right.
Like the first thing I think of is, let's say, God, hopefully this never happens. We go through nuclear fallout.
Right.
It destroys the entire earth. But some people go into caves. They survive. 500 years from now, things that's here, cars, houses are going to be destroyed.
Right.
Some cars could be buried below all this stuff.
That's right.
Civilizations thousands of years from now might be with their little brush and going, what is...
Yeah. What is
it's a Chevy? What's a Chevy? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, here's another fact. They theorize that So a show I watched on another podcast, or actually listened to, I guess, was saying, was there civilizations on Earth before ours? And here's the wildest thing. The more advanced a civilization is, or the more advanced the technology is, the less chances you have of detecting it if you don't accidentally dig it up.
I mean,
You're not going to find, like on a UFO, you're not going to find carbon and soot and stuff from the exhaust.
that's true.
You're not going to probably find any outward radiation necessarily. That metal,
That's true.
we don't know what it is. Maybe it's not magnetic. Maybe we can't detect it with a metal detector. Like, we don't know the properties.
Well, yeah. And even like the only thing that he's mentioned is when he touched the UFO the first time.
Right.
Because he was trying, what he wanted to do is figure out, is this a ceramic? Is this a metal?
Right.
Is this a form of plastic? Because he says the colors are not per se reflective.
Right.
They look like a metal. But what he said was it was cold to the touch, which leads him
Okay.
to the assumption that it's a metal.
Right.
But he does not believe that that metal is something that we have here on Earth.
Right. Which I think is a really safe assumption.
But again, if it was buried and we uncovered it, does that mean that UFOs have really been here for thousands of years?
Oh, yeah. It would have to be. I just
And
think
that-
of War of the Worlds.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You're absolutely dead on. I didn't even think about that, but yeah, that would be dead on.
That's scary as heck.
Oh, yeah, big time.
Wait, hold on. Oh, man, this just occurred to me. Ship's entirely intact. It's not rusting. It was sealed up all that time. If there was nothing inside of it, is that more scary or less scary?
Less. Well, no, more
I
scary,
don't know.
actually.
I think it's more scary. Someone's coming back to it.
That is true.
These
true.
are the things that keep me up at night, Bert.
See, but like I would sit there and I would question if I was, man, I've got so many thoughts going through my brain. Let me slow myself down.
I know. I feel it.
If I was the one that found this on an archaeological dig,
Right.
I would question, this is clearly buried here. Am I about to unbury an entire civilization that we don't know anything about?
Right. That's your first thought, probably.
First thought, especially
Right.
if we're able to get inside of it, right? Like if I'm them and I pull it in and there's nothing inside there, I go,
How
is
do
this
they
like a
even get
garage
inside
for a
of it?
car? Mm-hmm.
How'd they even get the door open? Like, I got so many questions.
There's a lot to it, Nick.
Right.
There's a lot to this. Wait till we get to the next section.
You keep saying this, and it's escalating. We're escalating here.
You're about to pee in your pants.
Oh boy. I'm prepared.
Mm-hmm. You want to go to that section now?
Yeah. I mean, if I gotta be scared, I don't want to think about being scared.
Oh, you're
I
not
wanna
going to
be
be scared.
Oh, okay.
But you're going to sit there. I can almost guarantee, and I'm just going to call it,
Okay.
you're going to have some type of facial reaction where you're like, where in the world did any of this come from? This is probably the meat and potatoes. This is by far the most exciting part of this entire story.
All
for
right.
me.
I want to give it to me.
Let's stop talking about, let's be about it. Let's go. Boy, that Bob Lazar, he a squirrely one, isn't he? Something going on with that old Bob Lazar. He got some stuff. Listen, you guys, Mom, stop looking at me. Don't even look at me. Okay. We're not talking about this part 2 stuff. Okay. Listen, this was a long one. I mean, we're on our 17th hour. Listen, we had to do a part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4, part 5. Listen, a whole bunch of parts. But that just means you guys have to tune in later. You got to tune in next week. Next week, okay, I lied. It's going to be a 2-parter. But listen, these 2 parts are bangers. Listen, you guys know I got to leave you on a cliffhanger. That's my MO. I'm sorry. Nick, this is really your fault. This is really your fault. It's not my fault at all. Go ahead and tell him. Go ahead and tell him.
Tell them what?
Yeah, tell him it's your fault.
I don't know what we're talking about, but
it's his fault. This is my fault. It's his fault. Two-parter. It's his fault.
Oh yeah, I love two-parters. Why are we making him wait,
Nick? Let's just release a 4-hour podcast. It's fine.
No. I'd split it up into 10-minute segments and make him wait. Like, I'm the cruel one here. I'm terrible. Man.
Nick a doggone
I'm the
savage.
worst.
Well, the biggest thing is you guys are going to want to tune into next week's episode where we continue with the story of Bob. We've uncovered a lot of juicy stuff, but not the juiciest. We kept that for the end, as we always do.
Oh, yes.
But thank you all for showing up to this song and dance, and we'll see you again next week. Goodbye.
See ya.